Hey YouTube, it's Liberatingpulse again. I'm here with a tutorial on mixing and mastering in Logic Express. Now, if you're not at all interested in seeing how I mix and master songs, or not at all interested in learning how to do this, then please don't watch this movie, you'll probably get bored. But I hear there's an exclusive sneak peek of one of my songs in it that's going to be on my album, so just saying. Anyway, so because this is a really long movie and I don't want to bore you guys, and I apologize in case I do bore you, even if you're trying to learn. So enjoy it and comment, like, share, awesome stuff, and yeah. Okay, see ya. Oh, wait, on the flip side. So, wait. No, stop. Go. Alright, so to begin, I will show you guys a little bit of what I do to mix my songs, alright? So here I have one of my songs that's going to be on my upcoming album, which is basically awesome. But here I'll play a little bit of it. Alright, well, what I've done for all this is I've made sure the volume levels in all of these tracks are not overpowering each other, because if you have two tracks that are taking up the same frequencies and they're at near the same volume, they'll be fighting back and forth a little bit and they won't get along very well. So you want to try to avoid having instruments in the same frequency range that are panned center and all the same volume and everything. So what I did for this is I have two lead sounds which are playing the same notes, so I'll solo them here. Let's see. Get this set to loop. And there. So what I've done for these is I've made it so that they're both panned, well, one's panned to the left a little bit, the other one's panned to the right a little bit. And then to make them sound like they're coming from different sides, well, it gives it more depth if you do this, but you just add a sample delay. Now, this is one of the plugins that's in the delay section of Logic Express. What you can do is you can delay, say you want it to sound like it's coming from the left, what you do is you delay the right by a little bit. Probably not quite as much as this if you want a natural sound, but I was going for crazy experimental type thing. But yeah, you can usually delay it by like 15 or 20 samples and it will sound like it's coming from way over to your right or left. So when I delay the right, it makes it sound like it's coming from the left because it takes longer to get to the right, because sound takes time to get places and your ears are a little bit away from each other. So changing that will make it sound a bit more, have a bit more depth. So you won't have to pan it quite as much. So they're both different sounds playing the same thing, so there's not too much I needed to worry about here. Alright, now what I've also done for most of my tracks is, if you look up here, you'll see that for the filters, I've filtered out tons of the bass frequency. Now what I do here is I go to each track and I listen to it. Don't listen to it on solo though. What I do is I cut out as much of the bass frequency as I can until I can tell a difference, and then I'll bring it back a bit. But if you don't get rid of these bass frequencies here on the instruments except for the drum and the bass, then everything will end up getting all muddied in the low end of the mix. So let's see, this is for one of the lead sounds. Now it sounds pretty good right now if I bypass it, so if I skip all this filtering, it has a much richer sound, but the problem is if I have that in my song, it will muddy up the bass that I've so carefully crafted and all that stuff. Okay, so what you want to do is make sure things are not interfering with each other, so keep them panned away from each other and filter out as much bass as you can whenever possible. Now, another thing I do when I mix is I like to send my drums to a bus so that I can mix them all together and then have it go to the rest of the mix. So what I've done here is got all my drums here, and I have them all set to go to bus 4 instead of stereo output, which is the default. So if I go over to bus 4, see I have my drum thing here, and what I've done to this is I've compressed it a little bit. All my drums here. Now what this does is it helps the drums to sort of, see, they talk to each other a little bit, because when the kick hits, everything else quiets down so that the kick becomes the most obvious thing there. Then I've also got a limiter to keep it from getting too loud. If there's little spikes in it, then it will cancel those out. Otherwise, my mix will be, it will be incredibly dynamic, but I don't want it to be quite so dynamic that I can't get any volume out of it. So that's what I've done there. Now another thing that I would recommend is setting up a bus for reverb, a send for your reverb. So what I would do is if I want reverb on one of these, I would go to the send and send it to, I don't know, bus 16 or something, and put reverb on it, and then you would choose this reverb and make it sound good for your whole song, and then when you need that instrument to have reverb, you just turn this up, and then it will give it more and more, it will send more and more of the signal over to this reverb bus right here. But the thing is, when you're mixing in reverb, you need to be careful, because this is another thing that can muddy up mixes. If you have too much reverb, then it can make things just sort of mix together and sound like pudding or something. I don't know if pudding has a sound, but that's what it makes me think of. So don't put too much reverb on everything. Just be very careful with that. When you're adding reverb, if you want it to sound, if you're making a natural sounding thing, add less reverb than you think is necessary, because otherwise you'll end up putting too much because you think it sounds good. And so let's see, I'm going to take this off because that's not what I intended for that instrument, because that's just a snare right here. Alright, so let's see, got to recap all this stuff so that I can remember what I've told you so far. So let's see, mix things left and right, make sure you've got a good stereo image, use the sample delay to make things sound like they're coming from a certain direction rather than being louder in one speaker than the other, and also filter out as much bass as you can, and use your sends for reverb and stuff like that. And also don't be shy to use the buses to mix together instruments that are very similar, like the drums. Now another thing about the drums is if you have a bunch of drum things that are on the same drum machine, like this, I've got, on this one I've got my kick, a clap, another clap, and a bunch of these other sounds. Now the thing about these is that a lot of them I don't want to have the lower frequencies. So what I've done is I take it so that I click and hold on the ultra beat thing here and choose multi-output. Now this allows me to have multiple different outputs from the drums, so I can mix them differently. Like the kick, I gave it its own output here because I put a lot of crazy effects on the kick, so it would have a nice tight and dirty sound. So if I go into here, after you've selected multi-output, what you can do is select right here. You can see these different numbers. Now these, the ones that say 3 to 4 all the way up to 15 through 16 are all stereo outputs. So each of them is 2 channels. So you can send it out to here, and so you'll have a different bus for it than the main one, which is the default for everything. So let's see, I've got, now to add these, normally you don't see these other UB 3 through 4, UB 5 through 6, stuff like that. So what you have to do is you have to click this plus button down here, which appears once you select multi-output. So that's a good way to split up your drums so that you can sort of divide and conquer and filter out the frequencies that don't make sense for like a cymbal. You don't want to have bass frequencies in it generally, unless it's a gong or something crazy. Guess I wouldn't know much about that. When you think it sounds pretty good, now what you want to do is you want to listen to your whole song and make sure that the instruments are a good volume so that they're not trying to overpower each other, like I said earlier.